My daughter Jessica's smile shone brightly in our Philadelphia kitchen as she handed me an envelope. "A surprise for you, Dad." Inside, I found a demand for $400,000, her husband David's debt due Monday. When I refused, she threw scalding coffee at my chest. David screamed, "Get out!" An hour later, the police arrived. But that was just the start of my revenge. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The November light in Philadelphia had a certain soft, golden quality to it, a gentle warmth that belied the crisp autumn air outside. It streamed through my kitchen windows, casting familiar shadows across the linoleum floor I'd mopped just yesterday. Steam rose from my coffee cup, a plume of dark, rich aroma that mingled with the scent of newsprint from the open pages of the Tribune spread across the table. This was my ritual, my sanctuary. 30 years in this house had ingrained a sense of peace so deep it felt like it was part of the foundation. "Dad, I have a surprise for you." Jessica's voice, bright and a little too cheerful, cut through the quiet. I glanced up from the sports section to see her standing in the doorway to the hall. She was clutching a thick manila envelope to her chest like a shield. Her smile was wide, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. There was a flicker of something else there, a nervousness that felt out of place. Behind her, David appeared, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. He had a casual confidence, the air of a man who felt he belonged here, which he most certainly did not. This was my kitchen, my morning, my peace they were interrupting. "What kind of surprise?" I asked, folding the newspaper with deliberate care and setting it beside my half-eaten toast. The coffee had gone lukewarm, but I took a sip anyway, buying a moment to study their faces. A united front. Jessica's laugh sounded forced. "Just open it, you'll see." She stepped forward and thrust the envelope toward me. Her fingers trembled slightly. The first thing I noticed was the return address. Some law firm downtown I'd never heard of. Then I felt the weight of it, thick with documents that rustled as I turned it over in my hands. It felt cold, official. "Go ahead, Arthur." David's voice was flat, cutting through the morning stillness like a blade. "We've been waiting to share this with you." The envelope tore easily. Papers spilled out onto my breakfast table, covering the box scores and headlines. Official letterhead, numbers in neat columns, signatures I didn't recognize. My eyes moved from page to page, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Credit card statements from Las Vegas, loan documents from Atlantic City, casino receipts from riverboats I'd only ever heard of on the news. And on every single one, my name, my signature. What the hell is this? The words came out sharper than I intended. The coffee cup in my hand began to tremble, rattling softly against the saucer. I set it down before I could spill it. Jessica's voice had lost all its artificial sweetness. It was as cold as the November air outside. "Those are your debts, Dad." My gaze scanned the pages, a chaotic mess of forged signatures and false promises. My heart hammered against my ribs. And then, at the bottom of a summary page, I saw the final tally. A number so large it seemed impossible, a figure from another world. $400,000. The cup on the table started to shake again, this time from the tremor running through my own hand. My own hand was a stranger to me, trembling uncontrollably as it rested near the coffee cup. The number on the page didn't change, no matter how many times my eyes scanned it. $400,000. It was a sum so vast, so alien, it might as well have been written in another language. "This is some kind of sick joke," I finally managed to say, my voice raspy. I spread the papers wider, forcing myself to look at the details. "Las Vegas? I've never been to a casino in my life." "We found them in your desk, Dad," Jessica said. Her voice was devoid of any emotion, flat and hard like slate. "When we were helping you get organized last month, remember?" I remembered them going through my filing cabinets while I made them lunch. I didn't remember them planting a landmine in the middle of my life. "These signatures are forged." David pushed himself off the counter, taking a step closer. His presence was suddenly intimidating in my own kitchen. "Memory isn't what it used to be, is it, Arthur? Those signatures look pretty authentic to me." He was right. The handwriting was a perfect imitation of my own. down to the way I looped the A in Arthur. A cold dread, colder than the November morning, began to creep up my spine. Someone had studied me. Someone had planned this meticulously. These need to be paid by Monday. David's tone had gone completely businesslike. Otherwise, the creditors will start seizing assets. The house, the cars, everything. Monday. Today was Monday. I looked up at my daughter, 35 years old, the same girl I had taught to ride a bike in the driveway just outside. Tears were beginning to well in her eyes, a perfectly timed performance. "We can't let that happen, Dad. We've got nowhere else to go." The performance was for my benefit, but the lie behind it was for theirs. I pushed my chair back from the table, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. The papers scattered. "Family doesn't forge signatures," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "Family doesn't create fake debts to steal a man's home." Jessica's face transformed. The fake tears vanished, replaced by a flash of cold, calculating rage. "Selfish," she hissed, her voice cracking like a whip. "You're too selfish to care about anyone but yourself." She moved toward the coffee pot on the counter, her movements sharp and jerky. "My husband can't find work. We're about to lose everything. And you're just sitting there, acting like none of this is your fault." "Emily, calm down," I started, but something in her posture made me take a step back. "Calm down?" She spun around, the glass coffee pot in her hands, steam rising from the fresh brew. "I will not calm down." "I raised you better than this," I said quietly, a father's last, desperate appeal. "You raised me to clean up your messes." The words exploded out of her, and then the coffee pot was moving. It arced through the air in a perfect, horrifying trajectory toward my chest. I saw it coming but couldn't react fast enough. The scalding liquid hit me like liquid fire, soaking through my shirt in an instant. A raw, searing heat spread across my skin, and I gasped, stumbling backward. The pain was immediate, overwhelming. Through a haze of shock, I saw her standing there, holding the empty pot, her chest heaving. For a moment, she looked as stunned as I felt. Then David stepped forward, and his expression wasn't shocked at all. It was satisfied. "Get out," he said, his voice calm, almost conversational. "This is our house now. Get out." The cold Philadelphia air was a shock against my burned skin, a brutal awakening after the suffocating betrayal in my kitchen. For a moment, I just stood on my back porch, the screen door whispering shut behind me. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a painful reminder of what had just happened. My own daughter, my own home, gone. But David had made a mistake. In his arrogance, he'd given me 5 minutes to pack a bag, 5 minutes to be alone in my bedroom, away from their watchful eyes. It was just enough time. I hadn't just packed clothes. I had grabbed the manila folder from its hiding place in my desk drawer, the property deed, my birth certificate, my will, everything that proved the house belonged to me. With my wallet, keys, and that precious folder tucked into a small suitcase, I had slipped out the back door, a refugee in my own life. My feet moved on autopilot across the damp grass of my backyard, toward the fence line that separated my property from Walter Sterling's. For 15 years, Walt had been more than a neighbor. He was a friend. We'd shared coffees, complained about the Eagles, and watched the neighborhood change around us. But I had never imposed on him, never shown up at his door broken. His kitchen light was on. I could see his silhouette through the window, a comforting beacon of normalcy in a world that had suddenly tilted off its axis. I knocked on his back door, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet morning. He opened it wearing a blue terrycloth robe, a half-amused look on his face that instantly vanished when he saw me. His eyes widened, taking in my disheveled state, the suitcase, the raw emotion on my face. "Arthur, in God's name, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse than that, Walt," I said, my voice hoarse. "Much worse." He stepped back immediately, ushering me inside without another question. His kitchen was warm and smelled of bacon and fresh coffee. It was everything my own kitchen had ceased to be just minutes earlier. Safe, sane, welcoming. Sit down," he gestured to a chair at his small table. He poured me a coffee without my asking, and his movements were calm and steady, a direct contrast to the violent tremor in my own hands. As I eased myself into the chair, A sharp wince escaped me as my shirt pulled against the tender skin on my chest. Walter's gaze sharpened. "You're hurt." It wasn't a question. Before I could protest, he was gone, returning from the bathroom with a tube of ointment and a clean cloth. "Shirt off," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I peeled away the coffee-soaked fabric, revealing the angry red patches of the burns. Walter's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, simply applying the salve with a gentle, practiced hand. The simple act of kindness was so profound, so unexpected, that I felt my eyes begin to burn for a different reason. He passed me a clean t-shirt from a laundry basket. It was old and soft. As I pulled it on, the warmth of his home began to seep into my bones, chasing away some of the chill. I took a long sip of the hot coffee. Walter sat opposite me, his face etched with concern, waiting. He didn't rush me. He let the silence stretch until I was ready to fill it. Finally, I looked at him, my oldest friend. "It didn't start this morning, Walt," I said, my voice low but clear. "It started 4 years ago, the day I was stupid enough to let them move in." Walter leaned forward, his coffee forgotten on the table. His expression was one of complete, focused attention. 4 years? Arthur, what in the world have you been putting up with? I took a deep breath, the story I'd kept locked away for so long finally tumbling out. It started small, as these things always do. A phone call from Jessica, her voice filled with manufactured panic. David had lost another job. They couldn't make rent. Could they just stay in my spare room for a month? Just a month, until he found something new. 1 month turned into 6, I said, staring into my own reflection in the dark coffee. 6 months turned into 4 years, and he never really looked for work, not seriously. I told Walt about the garage, how I came home one day to find 30 years of carefully organized tools rearranged into a chaotic mess David called efficient. When I confronted him, he just smiled that smug smile of his. "This is our garage now, Arthur. We're all family here." He actually said that? Walt's voice was low with disbelief. He said it like he was doing me a favor, and Jessica defended him. She said I was being unreasonable, that I needed to learn to share my space. The floodgates were open now. I told him about the late-night poker games, the friends of David's drinking my beer and eating my food. I told him about the $15,000 investment in a food truck franchise that never materialized. David had used the money to pay off a debt he hadn't mentioned, then told me he'd saved me from further losses. Jessica had backed him up, saying I should be grateful. Grateful, I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Grateful for being robbed by my own family. "Why didn't you throw them out, Arthur?" The question hung in the air, the same one I had been asking myself. "Because she's my daughter," I admitted, the shame of it heavy in my chest. Because every time I tried to set a boundary, she would cry and talk about family and how much they needed me. I kept thinking he would change. I kept thinking she would see him for what he was. I pulled out my phone. "But that wasn't even the worst of it, Walt. The real problem, the reason for this morning, it's all here." "Oh." I swiped through the photos I'd taken of David's laptop screen when he'd carelessly left it open. I showed Walt the online betting accounts, the transaction histories showing thousands of dollars in losses every single month. I showed him the credit card applications, all using my information. Then I showed him the other screenshots, the text messages. When the legal sites cut him off, he moved on to loan sharks, I explained, my voice barely a whisper. I zoomed in on a message from a contact listed only as Iceman Mike. It was a graphic threat involving broken kneecaps. Walter's face had gone pale. "These are dangerous people, Arthur." "I know, and there's one last thing." I took a final, steadying breath. "He was arrested last year for writing fraudulent checks. He's out on bail. The trial is scheduled for next month." Jessica knew, Walt. She knew about the gambling, the loan sharks, the arrest. She knew everything. I finally looked up from the phone and met my friend's horrified gaze. I laid the final piece of the puzzle out for him. This whole scheme this morning, the $400,000 debt, it was all a desperate plan. They needed to pin his debts on me, seize the house as an asset, and make me the fall guy before his trial started. Walter stared at the phone, then at the red burn marks visible on my neck, and then back at my eyes. The compassionate concern on his face slowly hardened into something else. Something solid, resolute. His fist came down on the kitchen table, making both coffee mugs jump. "Arthur," he said, his voice low and steely, "this is not a family drama. This is a criminal conspiracy, and we are going to end it." Walter's words hung in the warm kitchen air, heavy and absolute. Criminal conspiracy. The phrase echoed in my mind, sounding like something from a television show, not my own life. Part of me, the part that had been a father for 35 years, recoiled from the idea. "Walt, I can't," I whispered, shaking my head. The coffee in my cup had grown cold. "She's still my daughter. If I call the police, what happens to her? She could go to jail." For a moment, I didn't see the woman who had scalded me. I saw a little girl with scraped knees, a teenager crying over her first heartbreak, the young bride I had walked down the aisle. How could I be the one to potentially put her behind bars? Walter's voice was firm but not unkind. He walked over to the old-fashioned landline phone mounted on his wall, a relic from another era. He lifted the handset. "Your daughter wouldn't throw scalding coffee at her father, Arthur. Your daughter wouldn't forge legal documents to steal your home. The woman in your kitchen right now is a criminal who happens to share your DNA." He held the handset out towards me. "They assaulted you. They have committed fraud, identity theft, and extortion. If you don't make this call right now, they will destroy whatever evidence is left and disappear with everything they can carry." My eyes were fixed on the coiled cord of the phone. I thought about the 4 years of quiet invasions, of my boundaries being eroded piece by piece. I thought about my life savings. Gone. I touched the tender skin on my chest, the burn a constant, throbbing reminder of her capacity for cruelty. Walter asked the question that cut through all my hesitation. "What do you think happens next time, Arthur?" Because there will be a next time. People like this, they don't stop. They escalate until someone makes them stop. He was right. The loving daughter I remembered was a ghost, a memory. The woman in my house was a stranger, and she was dangerous. With a hand that was steadier than it had been all morning, I took the phone from him. The plastic felt heavier than it should have. I dialed the 3 numbers. 911. After 2 rings, a calm, professional voice answered. 911. What is your emergency? My own voice felt like it belonged to someone else. I need to report a domestic assault." "Are you injured, sir?" "Yes. Burns on my chest." The perpetrator threw hot coffee on me. "Are you in a safe location now?" "Yes," I said, giving her Walter's address. My voice grew stronger with each factual detail. It was easier to focus on the facts than the feelings. "Can you tell me about the person who attacked you?" the dispatcher asked. This was the hardest part. I took a breath. "My daughter, Emily Thompson." Saying her new married name felt wrong. I corrected myself. Jessica Hayes. Her and her husband David have been living with me. They presented me with fraudulent debt documents this morning. When I refused to pay, she became violent. "Oh, are the perpetrators still at your residence, sir?" "Yes, both of them." I spelled their names carefully, giving their descriptions as best I could. The process felt cold, sterile, like I was describing characters in a book. "Officers have been dispatched to your location, sir," the dispatcher said, her tone unchanged. "Can you remain where you are until they arrive?" "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The call concluded with a few more questions, and then I slowly placed the handset back in its cradle. The click it made seemed to echo through the silent kitchen. I looked at Walter. The deed was done. The bridge was crossed, and there was no turning back. The 15 minutes that followed felt longer than the 4 years I had endured their presence. Every tick of Walter's grandfather clock seemed to echo in the silent kitchen. I sat at the table, my hands wrapped around a fresh mug of coffee I had no intention of drinking. Walter stood by the window, a silent watchman. I wasn't sure if I was dreading the police arriving or anticipating it. It was a strange cocktail of fear and grim resolution. Then, a black and white patrol car glided to a stop in Walter's driveway, silent and professional. It was followed by a second that parked at the curb. 2 officers emerged. A tall woman with streaks of gray in her dark hair, and a younger man who moved with a controlled, alert energy. They walked to the front door with purpose. Walter met them and led them into the kitchen where I stood waiting. "Mr. Vance?" the female officer said, extending a hand. Her name tag read Martinez. "I'm Officer Martinez. This is Officer Chen. We're responding to your domestic assault call." "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice steady. Her eyes immediately went to the red marks visible above the collar of my t-shirt, her professional gaze missing nothing. "Sir, can we see the extent of your injuries?" I lifted the hem of my shirt. Officer Chen took several photos with his phone while Martinez pulled out a notebook. "I need you to walk us through exactly what happened this morning," she said. "Start from the beginning." I recounted the events chronologically, just as I had on the phone. Jessica's arrival, the envelope, the impossible debt, my refusal, the assault. I kept my voice even and factual, letting the events speak for themselves. The story was monstrous enough without any added emotion. "Do you have the documents they showed you?" Chen asked. "They're still in my house, on the kitchen table. They asked me to leave before I could collect them." Martinez and Chen exchanged a look. It was a look of professional understanding, one that told me they had seen this exact kind of story play out before. "We'll need to interview the other parties and secure that evidence," Martinez explained. "Would you be willing to accompany us to your residence?" "Of course," I said. The walk across my own lawn felt surreal. Walter was by my side, and the two officers flanked us. My house, which had felt like a prison just an hour ago, now looked like a crime scene. Officer Martinez didn't knock politely. She rapped her knuckles on the front door with authority. "Philadelphia police! Open up!" We heard a scramble inside, the sound of hushed, frantic voices. Then Jessica's voice, trying to sound normal. "Just a minute." When the door opened, her face was a mask of strained innocence. That mask crumbled the moment she saw me standing behind the two officers. Her eyes widened in panic. David appeared in the hallway behind her, his attempt at a smug expression faltering into pure shock. "Jessica Hayes," Officer Martinez said, stepping forward, taking control of the space. "We need to speak with you about an incident that occurred here this morning." I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "We have a formal complaint of domestic assault," Officer Chen stated calmly, gesturing for David to step outside onto the porch. "We'll need to interview you separately." The united front they had presented so confidently that morning was shattered in an instant. While Chen began questioning a blustering David outside, Martinez led me into the kitchen. The fraudulent documents were still scattered across the table, a testament to the morning's chaos. The dark splash of coffee was a stark stain on the linoleum floor. Martinez surveyed the scene, her expression unreadable. She picked up one of the forged credit card statements, then looked at the coffee stain on the floor, then back at Jessica, who was being guarded by the doorway. "Miss Hayes," Martinez said, her voice dangerously quiet, "we have a report of assault, and what looks like attempted fraud. You have a lot of explaining to do." Jessica's face, which had been a mask of strained innocence just moments before, completely fell apart. Color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking pale and small in the bright kitchen light. "An accident," she stammered, her eyes darting between Officer Martinez and me. "The coffee. It was an accident. I tripped. And the papers. It's all just a big misunderstanding." She was trying to deploy the same tears and frantic excuses that had worked on me for years, but Officer Martinez was immune. Her expression remained impassive, her gaze unwavering. Outside, David must have heard the shift in tone. His voice rose from the porch, loud and belligerent. "This is harassment. The old man is confused. He's been forgetting things for years. You can't listen to him. He's making it all up." His aggression was a stark contrast to Jessica's crumbling facade, and it only seemed to seal their fate. Officer Martinez didn't engage with the excuses or the accusations. She had seen the evidence. She had heard the conflicting stories. She gave a short, sharp nod to Officer Chen, who had come back inside. That was it. The decision was made. "Jessica Hayes," Martinez said, her voice clear and formal, cutting through the chaos. "You are under arrest for domestic battery." She took Jessica's arm gently but firmly. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut around Jessica's wrists was shockingly loud in the quiet kitchen. A sob escaped her lips, a raw, broken sound that was nothing like the crocodile tears she had shed earlier. This was real. Officer Chen moved to David, who immediately began to struggle. "Get your hands off me. I haven't done anything. This is my house." "Sir, you need to calm down," Chen said, his voice even but firm, as he efficiently secured David's hands behind his back. I stood on my front lawn with Walter, watching as they were led from the house. It felt like an out-of-body experience. Jessica wouldn't look at me, her head bowed in shame, mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. David, on the other hand, glared at me with pure hatred, still shouting accusations until he was placed in the back of a patrol car. A transport van had arrived quietly. I watched as my daughter and son-in-law were loaded into separate vehicles. The heavy metal doors closed, cutting off David's final shouts and hiding Jessica's tears from view. The family I had known, the one I had tried so hard to hold together, was officially and irrevocably broken. As the police cars pulled away, taking the chaos with them, a profound silence settled over the street. I didn't feel the victory I might have expected. There was no triumph, just a deep, hollow sense of relief that the lies were finally over. Officer Martinez walked over to me, handing me a small white card. "This has the case number and contact information for the prosecutor's office. Someone will be in touch about pressing formal charges and scheduling court appearances." She gave me a brief, sympathetic look. "You did the right thing, Mr. Vance." Then she too was gone. The street was empty. It was just me and Walter, standing in the quiet morning air. He placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "Come on, Arthur," he said softly. "Let's go home." 3 weeks later, I was finally starting to feel like I was breathing my own air again. I'd spent the time reclaiming my house, not just cleaning it, but truly making it mine. I rearranged the furniture in the living room, threw out the cheap, tasteless decor Jessica had insisted on, and spent a whole weekend reorganizing my garage back to its proper, logical state. Each small act was a step away from the 4-year-long shadow they had cast over my life. One afternoon, as I was polishing the silver, Walter knocked on my back door. He was holding a thick manila envelope, and for a heart-stopping second, the memory of that terrible morning flashed in my mind. But then I saw his calm, friendly face, and the tension eased. "I've been doing some research," he said, setting the envelope on the now gleaming kitchen table. "Old teacher's habit. I know how to find things in the public record. He spread the contents across the table like a dealer laying out a losing hand. And what a losing hand it was. David's entire world had collapsed with a speed that was almost breathtaking. The first document was a Chapter 7 bankruptcy petition. The bold letters across the top seemed to scream his failure. The man who had tried to steal my $400,000 was now begging a federal judge to wipe away over $300,000 of his own legitimate gambling debts. "Look at this one," Walter said, pointing to a letter with the letterhead of a credit recovery agency. "His car got repossessed 2 days after the arrest. Couldn't make the payments without access to your funds or Jessica's income." Next was a formal termination letter from a construction company. They had fired him immediately upon learning of his domestic violence arrest, citing a standard morals clause in his contract. The employment rejection letters from 3 other companies told the rest of that story. No one would hire a man facing multiple felony charges. The most pathetic document was a change of address form he had been required to file with the court. His new legal residence, the Salvation Army shelter on Harrison Street. "He's homeless," I stated, the fact sinking in. "Worse than that," Walter said, pushing a printout of text messages across the table. They were from Iceman Mike. The threats were no longer veiled. They were explicit, brutal promises of violence for non-payment. "He's not just broke, Arthur, he's being hunted." I looked at the collection of papers, a blueprint of a man's complete and utter self-destruction. There was no joy in it, no sense of victory, just a profound, grim feeling of waste. He had been so arrogant, so sure of his own cleverness, and in the end, his own actions had consumed him entirely. I pushed the papers back towards Walter. "He built his own prison, Walt, long before the police ever showed up." Walter nodded, gathering the documents back into the envelope. "That's David's story. His whole world gone in 3 weeks." He paused, his expression growing more serious, more somber. "But Jessica," he said, looking me in the eye, "that's a separate story entirely, and it's not over yet." I braced myself. What about Jessica? Walter's expression softened with a sadness that hadn't been there when he was talking about David. For David, it was a matter of simple justice. For Jessica, it was a tragedy. "Her story is different," he began, consulting a small notebook he'd started keeping. While he faced financial ruin, she confronted the complete destruction of every relationship she'd ever valued. The judge went easier on her. 18 months probation, mandatory anger management classes, and a permanent restraining order. "She's not to come within 500 feet of you or this house." He paused, looking up from his notes. "She's violated it twice already." My blood ran cold. "What?" "Showed up here both times while you were out at the grocery store. A neighbor called it in. The first time, she was trying to get inside, said she'd left important things in her old room. The second time, the neighbor said she was just sitting on your front porch, crying. Each violation had added more fines and extended her probation. The consequences were accumulating, like compound interest on a debt she could never repay. Her arrest photo had appeared in the local paper, and her retail manager position had vanished within hours. With the divorce from David turning nasty and their lawyer dropping them, she had nowhere to go. She was staying at the women's shelter on Madison Avenue. A bitter, terrible irony. "She's been trying to reach you," Walter continued, pulling a folded envelope from his jacket pocket. "This came to my address yesterday. She figured you wouldn't open anything from her directly." The letter was 3 pages long, written in her familiar, careful script. I read the first paragraph, a torrent of apologies and desperate pleas. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I never meant for it to go this far. David," he twisted everything. "Please, I just need another chance." I folded it back up. "She wants another chance," I said simply. "What are you going to do?" Walter asked, his voice gentle. I looked out the kitchen window, at the pedestrians passing by on the sidewalk, living their ordinary lives, untouched by this kind of specific, personal ruin. I thought of all the years I had raised her alone, of all the sacrifices, but then I thought of her face, twisted in rage, and the searing heat of the coffee. "She made her choice 4 years ago, Walt," I said, my voice quiet but final. "She chose him over basic decency. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned." As if on cue, my eyes caught a small splash of color by my front door, a small bouquet of daisies and baby's breath, tucked against the frame, the kind she used to pick from the garden as a little girl. She had been here again. Without another word, I stood up and walked to the front of the house. I opened the door, picked up the flowers, and walked directly to the garbage can beside the porch. I dropped them inside. The gesture was not angry. It was not hateful. It was simply done. I came back inside and locked the door, a sense of sad finality settling over me. The past was finally where it belonged. I sat back down at the table and looked at Walter, the one person who had shown me true loyalty. My expression must have changed, because he leaned in, curious. "Walter," I said, my tone shifting, "thank you for everything. Now, there's something about me you don't know. Something I've never told anyone in my life here in Philadelphia." Walter's eyebrows rose in curiosity. "A secret? Arthur, after everything we've just been through, what more could there possibly be?" A small, genuine smile touched my lips for the first time in weeks. It felt foreign, but good. "Come with me," I said, leading him out of the kitchen and down the hall to my home office. It was a room he'd only ever glanced into, a simple space with a desk, a computer, and a large bookshelf filled with what he assumed were old automotive manuals and history books. He assumed wrong. I walked over to the bookshelf, to a section filled with thick, leather-bound encyclopedias. My hand reached behind a volume on European history, and I pressed a small, invisible switch. There was a soft click, followed by the gentle whir of a hidden motor. Walter's jaw dropped as the entire middle section of the bookshelf swung inward, revealing a doorway to a second, smaller room he never knew existed. "What in the world?" he breathed, following me inside. The hidden room was a world away from the quiet, modest life of a retired mechanic. A sleek, modern computer sat on a large desk. One wall was covered in a corkboard pinned with maps of cities: Seattle, Charleston, Portland, each one dotted with notes and circled restaurants. The other wall was decorated with framed awards and certificates from culinary guilds and journalistic societies. A filing cabinet stood in the corner, its drawers neatly labeled press credentials, expense reports, food and travel magazine, the New York Times. Walter stared, speechless, turning a slow circle as he took it all in. "For 30 years I've lived two lives, Walt," I explained, my voice quiet in the secret space. The life everyone here knew was Arthur Vance, the retired mechanic. A simple man with a modest pension, someone who, my daughter thought, needed her help to manage his affairs. I paused, letting him absorb the implications. But there's another Arthur Vance. For 30 years, that man has been a restaurant critic. It started as a passion, a side job, but it grew into a career, a very successful one. He finally found his voice. But why keep it a secret? "My late wife," I said with a sad smile. "She always resented the travel. She thought fixing engines was real work, and writing about food was a frivolous hobby. After she passed, I kept it quiet out of habit, I suppose. But also, I think, subconsciously, I was protecting myself. I saw Jessica's complicated relationship with money, David's sense of entitlement. If they had known I was financially independent, they would have seen me as a bank, not a father, long before they got this desperate." I picked up a laminated press pass from my desk. My photo smiled back, under a name no one in my family would have recognized, my professional pseudonym. Walter looked from the pass to the awards on the wall, and then back to me. The look on his face was one of dawning, profound understanding. He saw it all now, the quiet strength, the meticulous nature, the hidden depths. He wasn't looking at a victim anymore. He was looking at a survivor who had always been in control. A slow smile spread across his face, one of pure, unadulterated admiration. "Well, I'll be damned, Arthur," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "You were always 10 steps ahead of them, weren't you?" Sharing the secret I had guarded for 3 decades felt like setting down a heavy weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. The relief was immense. Walter's admiration was a balm on the wounds of the past few weeks, a confirmation that I was more than the victim my daughter had tried to make me. As if on cue, a phone started ringing. It wasn't the landline in the kitchen, but a sleek smartphone that had been charging on my secret desk. The screen lit up with a name and a logo: Margaret, Food and Travel Magazine. I picked it up, and as I answered, I could feel my posture straighten, my voice shift. The tired, wounded retiree vanished, replaced by the professional who had built a career on exacting standards and honest reviews. "Margaret, good to hear from you," I said, my voice crisp. Walter watched, fascinated, as I paced the small office. "Yes, I'm ready to get back to work," I continued. "What do you have for me? Portland? Interesting. I've heard good things about their new farm-to-table scene. Deconstructed comfort food? Sounds pretentious, but I'll give it a fair shot. No, next week is perfect. Send me the details in the advance. I'll book my own flight." I listened for another moment, then smiled. "Yes, it's been a few months. Had to take some personal time to deal with a family issue." I glanced at Walter, who was now grinning from ear to ear. "But I can confidently say that issue has been permanently resolved. I'll see you in Portland." I ended the call and placed the phone back on the desk. The silence in the room was different now, filled with a new kind of energy. "She has no idea how right she is," I said to Walter, and we both shared a laugh. It felt good to laugh again. Later, after Walter had gone home, still shaking his head in amazement, I walked through my house. It was no longer a crime scene, no longer a place of betrayal. It was simply my home again. The garage was pristine, my tools hanging in their proper places. The spare bedroom, once their domain, had been stripped of all their belongings, the walls freshly painted a calm, clean white. My real computer was back in its rightful spot by the window, not hidden away behind a false wall. For the first time in 4 years, my home felt truly, completely mine. The knock on the back door later that evening was familiar and welcome. It was Walter, but this time he wasn't carrying a folder of bad news. He was holding a bottle of expensive-looking red wine and wearing a deeply satisfied expression. He walked into the kitchen, set the bottle on the table with a decisive thud, and looked at me. "The court handed down the final sentences today," he announced. "It's over, Arthur. It's finally over." Walter worked the corkscrew with a practiced efficiency, freeing the cork with a soft, satisfying pop. He poured the deep red liquid into 2 glasses, the rich aroma of old vine Zinfandel filling my kitchen. The atmosphere was one of quiet solemnity, not celebration. We had been through a war, and this was the moment the treaty was being signed. I took the glass he offered, my hand steady. "So," I said, "tell me." "David got the worst of it, as he should have," Walter began, settling into his usual chair. "Given his prior fraud conviction and the fact that he was on probation, the judge wasn't lenient. He received a sentence of 8 months in county jail. 8 months. It didn't feel like enough for trying to destroy a man's life, but it was something. It was a consequence, real and unavoidable." "And Jessica?" I asked, my voice softer. 2 years of probation," Walter said, "and court-ordered anger management, of course." Her lawyer successfully argued that she was a first-time offender who was unduly influenced by her husband. I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Influenced? She was a willing co-conspirator." "We know that," Walter said, taking a sip of his wine. "But this is the legal system. In their eyes, she was the lesser of 2 evils." He leaned forward, a glint in his eye. "But here's the part I think you'll truly appreciate. The judge ordered her to pay restitution." My eyebrows went up. "How much?" $15,000. "To cover the emotional distress, the legal fees you're incurring with Abramson, and court costs." He paused, letting the information sink in before delivering the final, perfect detail. "She'll be paying it to you in installments, every month for the next 5 years. I stared into my wine glass, a slow, incredulous smile spreading across my face. The irony was poetic. The daughter who had tried to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from me would now be legally bound to send me a check every single month. It wasn't a windfall. It was a reminder. A constant, unavoidable acknowledgement of her crime and my victory, delivered by mail once a month. It was a far more fitting punishment than jail time. It was a sentence of consequence. Walter raised his glass, the red wine catching the light. "To justice, my friend," he proposed. I thought about it for a moment. Justice had been the tool, the path I had been forced to walk, but it was not the destination. I looked around my quiet, peaceful kitchen, at the fading afternoon light, at my good and true friend. I knew what my destination was. I raised my own glass to meet his. "To peace," I countered. We clinked our glasses, the clear, ringing sound sealing the end of the darkest chapter of my life. After Walter left, I stood alone in my kitchen for a long time, watching as the evening descended on the quiet Philadelphia street. The wine glass felt cool in my hand. Peace. It was such a simple word for such a profound feeling. It was the absence of fear, the end of lies, the quiet joy of being the sole sovereign of your own life. The next morning, I woke up before the Sunday. For the first time in 4 years, I didn't feel a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I didn't listen for footsteps from the spare room. The house was mine, and the silence was a blessing. I made my coffee, and instead of turning on the news, I went into my office and sat at my real desk. I opened my laptop and pulled up the email from Margaret. "Portland awaits your expert opinion." Without a moment's hesitation, I clicked the link and booked my flight for the following Tuesday. I chose a window seat. Then I opened a fresh document and titled it Portland Itinerary. For the next 2 hours, I was lost in a world of menus, chef interviews, and restaurant reviews. I mapped out my route through the city's most promising culinary destinations, my mind sharp and engaged, my passion for my work fully rekindled. This was the man I had been all along, and it felt incredible to let him breathe freely in his own home. Later that day, a locksmith came and replaced every lock on every door, installing new heavy-duty deadbolts. I also had him install a small, discreet security system that chimed softly whenever a door or window was opened. This wasn't paranoia. It was a practical declaration of boundaries. It was a promise I made to myself. Never again. Never again would my peace be so easily stolen. In the afternoon, I went out into the backyard. The garden, a space my late wife had adored, had been neglected during the long occupation of my home. Now I saw it with new eyes. I spent hours pulling weeds, my hands sinking into the rich, dark earth. I found an old gardening catalog and began circling new plantings, roses like the ones my wife had loved, sturdy perennials that would come back year after year. The act of nurturing the soil, of planning for future blooms, felt like I was nurturing my own soul. As dusk fell, I walked through the house, from the clean spare room to the reorganized garage. The air felt lighter. The shadows were no longer menacing. It was more than just quiet. It was tranquil. For the first time in years, the house settled around me with the comfortable, familiar sounds of a true home. The hum of the refrigerator, the gentle click of the heat turning on. It was the beautiful, simple music of a life reclaimed. 1 month to the day after the morning that changed everything, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and the newspaper. The November light was the same, the aroma of the coffee was the same, but the man sitting at the table was entirely different. The knot of dread that had lived in my stomach for 4 years was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady contentment. The mail arrived, and with it a long, official-looking envelope. There was no return address, only a payment processing center downtown. My heart didn't hammer. My hands didn't shake. I opened it calmly. Inside was a cashier's check for a modest sum, and a payment slip. Payment from Jessica Hayes for court-ordered restitution, one of 60. The first of 60 reminders. I looked at her name, and for the first time I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a distant clinical pity for the woman who had traded her father's love for a handful of nothing. I endorsed the back of the check, placed it in the folder for my next trip to the bank, and went back to my coffee. It was just business now. The emotional debt was closed forever. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Margaret. Portland awaits. Don't eat too much before you get here. I smiled. A real, unburdened smile. My past was a settled account. My future was calling. Tomorrow, I would fly to Portland. Tonight, I would finish planning my route through the city's most promising restaurants, my appetite for good food and honest work fully restored. I finished my coffee and stood, looking around the room where my nightmare had begun. Through the window, I could see the new rose bushes I had planted, their roots taking hold in the rich soil. The grandfather clock in the living room began to chime the hour, each note clear and resonant in the peaceful house, marking time that belonged entirely and exclusively to me. The man who had been a victim was gone, erased by the fire of betrayal. The man who had lived a secret life, hidden behind a false wall, was now free to be himself. I thought about the painful journey, the lies, the heartbreak. But I also thought about the unwavering loyalty of a good friend, the quiet strength I found within myself, and the simple, priceless value of peace. I hadn't sought revenge. I had sought freedom, and I had found it. Arthur Vance was finally whole, and he was free. They say that the true measure of a person's character is found not in the love they profess, but in the respect they show, especially when they think no one is watching. Arthur's story is a powerful reminder that trust, once broken, can shatter the very foundation of a family. It teaches us that while love can be unconditional, respect and safety must have boundaries. His journey shows us that it is never too late to stand up for ourselves, to reclaim our peace, and to demand the dignity we deserve. Strength isn't about the absence of pain or betrayal. It's about what we choose to do afterwards. It's about finding the courage to lock a door, not to keep others out, but to finally let peace in. The journey from a kitchen filled with the bitter taste of betrayal to one filled with the simple warmth of coffee and peace is a difficult one, but it is possible. Arthur's story reminds us of the profound pain that comes from a broken family bond, but it also celebrates the incredible strength found in true friendship, self-respect, and the quiet resilience of the human spirit. It leaves us with a feeling of hope that even after the deepest wounds, a new dawn is always waiting. If Arthur's story touched your heart, or reminded you of the strength you hold within yourself, we would be honored if you shared your thoughts in the comments below. Your wisdom and experiences are what make this community so special. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel so you never miss another story that matters. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to sharing another journey with you soon. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.